The question of your actual guilt or innocence has fascinated historians for centuries. The evidence was circumstantial, based on testimony from those whose survival depended on pleasing the king. Smeaton's tortured confession was the cornerstone, but confessions under torture are notoriously unreliable. The specific dates presented problems. Court records show you were pregnant or recently delivered during many alleged assignations, making multiple secret affairs physically difficult. The intense scrutiny of royal life made such concealment nearly impossible. The speed of the charges and trials suggests a predetermined outcome, not an investigation. Cromwell's efficiency raises the question, was evidence discovered or manufactured? Most tellingly, none of your alleged lovers, except the tortured Smeaton, confessed, even when offered commuted sentences. Men facing certain death had every incentive to admit guilt if it might save their lives. Yet they maintained innocence to the end. The political context supports your innocence. By 1536, Henry was desperate for a male heir and pursuing Jane Seymour. Your January miscarriage had ended your usefulness, making you an obstacle. Henry's character, revealed in his treatment of other wives and opponents, shows a man capable of eliminating anyone in his way. Yet the question extends beyond the charges to your behavior and character. Contemporary accounts describe you as intelligent, ambitious, politically astute, but also arrogant and vindictive. Your treatment of Catherine of Aragon and Princess Mary earned you enemies eager for your fall. Your sharp wit and willingness to argue with Henry, which first attracted him, may have become liabilities as the marriage deteriorated. Your intense relationship with George also raised eyebrows. Though no credible evidence supports the incest charge beyond a close sibling bond, your mutual support and obvious affection may have appeared suspicious to those looking for wrongdoing. Meanwhile, Henry was already planning his next marriage. On May 14th, the day before your trial, Archbishop Cranmer was summoned to pronounce your marriage null and void. The speed revealed Henry's eagerness to clear legal obstacles to Jane Seymour. The annulment cited the same theological arguments used against Catherine, claiming your union was invalid from the start due to your prior relationship with his sister Mary. The irony was exquisite. Henry simultaneously claimed you were guilty of adultery within the marriage, while arguing the marriage never existed. The logical contradiction was less important than the legal convenience. By declaring it null, he could claim you were never queen and Elizabeth was illegitimate. The psychological impact of this erasure must have been devastating. In a single stroke, Henry was erasing your identity, your life's work, your daughter's legitimacy. Preparations for your execution proceeded with grim efficiency. Henry imported a swordsman from Calais rather than use the traditional axe, a mercy presented as a quicker, more reliable method. Choosing a foreign executioner distanced Henry from the act and prevented an Englishman from refusing or sympathizing. The sword itself became an object of fascination and dread, kept hidden until the moment. Your behavior during final days revealed a woman struggling to maintain dignity and sanity. Kingston's reports show you alternately confident and despairing. You spoke of innocence and faith in God's vindication, but also made practical arrangements for death with clarity. Your concern for Elizabeth, denied a final visit, added another layer of cruelty. Your ladies, permitted to remain, provided both comfort and surveillance. They had once competed for your favor. Now they supported a doomed woman while protecting their own positions. The night before your execution, you spent hours in prayer, preparing your soul. You were calm and resigned, having finally accepted Henry would show no mercy. You also discussed practicalities, the clothing you'd wear, the expected behavior on the scaffold. Even in death, you understood you would perform for an audience, your final moments scrutinized for signs of guilt, innocence, repentance, or defiance. The morning of May 19th dawned gray and misty. You woke early, having slept little, and began the rituals of preparation. You chose a dark, gray damask gown with a white chemise, white a silent statement of innocence, gray acceptance of death. Your hair, once your crowning glory, was arranged simply and covered with a white coif to aid the executioner. Your final meal was simple, bread and wine, consumed more for ritual than appetite. As morning progressed, you heard the sounds of completion, the scaffold finished, workmen testing its construction, arranging straw to absorb your blood. The crowd gathered early, drawn by the unprecedented spectacle of a queen's execution. Among them were former courtiers, merchants, common people, some from curiosity, some from historical duty, some from the darker impulse to witness destruction. Kingston arrived with formal notification. You rose from your chair with dignity, straightened your gown, and declared yourself ready. The walk from your apartments to the scaffold was the longest journey of your life. Each step took you further from the world of the living. You passed through courtyards where you once walked as queen, past buildings where you'd exercised royal authority. The contrast was almost unbearable. The same stones that once echoed with footsteps seeking your favor now witnessed your final journey. As you emerged onto Tower Green, the crowd fell silent. The sight of a queen walking to death was so shocking that even hardened spectators were momentarily speechless. The scaffold was a simple wooden platform, raised only a few feet, designed for intimacy rather than spectacle, perhaps a vestige of respect for your former position. The executioner stood motionless beside the block, his sword hidden beneath straw. You mounted the steps steadily, assisted by your ladies. Once on the platform, you turned to face the crowd, preparing to deliver the customary speech. Your final words, preserved in contemporary accounts, were a protestation of loyalty to the king and acceptance of the judgment. You asked for prayers for your soul and hoped for God's mercy. What is most striking is what you did not say. You did not proclaim your innocence directly, nor did you attack Henry or the court. Whether this restraint reflected genuine acceptance, political calculation to protect Elizabeth, or sheer exhaustion remains debated. After speaking, you removed your headdress and jewelry, placing them carefully in your lady's hands, stripping away the last vestiges of queenship, preparing to meet death as simply Anne Boleyn. They blindfolded you with a white cloth, a final mercy sparing you the sight of the approaching sword and ensuring you would remain still. Kneeling erect beside the block, you maintained your royal bearing. The executioner approached silently, his foreign sword now revealed, longer, thinner, designed for a single precise stroke. He raised it, and in a movement so swift many missed it, brought the blade down in a single decisive stroke. Your head was severed with a precision that spoke to the swordsman's skill. The crowd's reaction was stunned silence, then gasps, prayers, murmured conversations. The reality of witnessing a queen's execution was overwhelming. Some crossed themselves, whispering prayers for your soul. Others stared in fascination. The executioner's efficiency was both mercy and horror. Your death was instantaneous, sparing prolonged agony, but the speed emphasized the finality. One moment you were a living woman, the next, a body on the scaffold. Your ladies, tears streaming, gathered your remains, wrapping head and body in white cloth with the tenderness of friends preparing a beloved for burial. Their grief was genuine and profound. Women who had served you through rise and fall, loyal to the end. The crowd dispersed almost immediately, as if eager to escape the weight of what they'd witnessed. The execution of a crowned queen challenged the very foundations of royal authority and divine right. Within hours, Henry was already moving forward. He married Jane Seymour in a private ceremony on May 30th, just 11 days after your death. The speed revealed his eagerness to put the episode behind him and begin anew with a compliant wife. But Henry's attempt to erase you from history was not entirely successful. Your daughter Elizabeth, though declared illegitimate, survived and would become one of England's greatest monarchs. The woman Henry destroyed in his pursuit of a male heir would be remembered through the daughter whose legitimacy he denied. The men who died with you were quickly forgotten, remembered primarily in connection with your story. Thomas Cromwell, who orchestrated the affair, continued to serve until his own fall and execution in 1540, a reminder that even the most valuable servants were expendable. The question of your guilt or innocence continued to haunt participants. Some, like Archbishop Cranmer, would later express private doubts. Others, like Norfolk, maintained public support while perhaps harboring private reservations. The broader implications of your execution extended far beyond immediate politics. It established that royal power could destroy even those closest to the throne, contributing to the climate of fear that characterized the latter part of Henry's reign. The king once seen as a Renaissance prince was now revealed as capable of extraordinary ruthlessness. International reaction was shock and condemnation. European courts, already horrified by the break with Rome, now viewed Henry as a tyrant who murdered his wife for lust. England's reputation was damaged, further isolating it from Catholic Europe. Yet for all the political calculations, the human cost remained most significant. A woman who had been the most powerful person in England after the king was reduced to a headless corpse on a scaffold, sacrificed to a husband's ambitions and insecurities. Your burial was as hurried and undignified as your trial. Your remains were placed in an old elm chest that once contained bow staves and interred in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula within the Tower grounds. No elaborate funeral, no royal ceremony, no monument marked the resting place of a former queen. The irony was fitting. You were laid to rest in the same chapel where other victims of royal justice were interred, including your brother George and the men who died as your alleged lovers. In the days following your execution, court life continued with a normality almost obscene in its callousness. Courtiers who once competed for your attention now ingratiated themselves with Jane Seymour. The machinery of government functioned as if nothing extraordinary occurred, as if executing a queen were merely another administrative task. Yet beneath the surface, the trauma reverberated. Those who witnessed your execution carried the memory of that swift, precise stroke that ended a life and changed history. The image of a blindfolded queen kneeling with dignity would haunt them forever. Henry's psychological state remains speculative. Contemporary accounts suggest no outward remorse. He threw himself into his new marriage with enthusiasm. But his haste to erase you from official records, removing portraits, carving away initials, replacing coats of arms, suggests a man desperate to escape the weight of what he'd done. History, however, preserves what rulers seek to destroy. Your story survived in the memories of those who knew you, in whispered court conversations, and in the growing legend of a woman who challenged the established order and paid the ultimate price. Your execution marked a turning point in Henry's reign and English history. It demonstrated the extent of royal power to destroy even the closest to the throne, establishing precedents that would influence the treatment of subsequent queens and opponents. The woman who had once been powerful enough to change England's religious direction was reduced to a cautionary tale about the dangers of ambition and the fickleness of royal favor. As the sun set on May 19, 1536, the Tower settled into an uneasy quiet. The scaffold was dismantled, the crowd dispersed, physical evidence cleared away. But the psychological and political consequences would shape England for generations. The woman who woke to the sound of steel being sharpened was now at peace. Her struggles finally ended. The blade, prepared with such care, performed its function with deadly efficiency, silencing forever a voice that once commanded kings and changed nations. In the growing darkness, as guards made their rounds and the Thames lapped against the walls, your ghost began its long haunting of English history. The woman erased from official memory would live on in stories, in historians' doubts, in the legend of a queen who dared challenge a king and paid with her life. The sound of steel sharpening had announced the beginning of your final day. The silence that followed your execution marked the end of one of the most dramatic and tragic chapters in the blood-soaked history of the English crown. In that silence, pregnant with what was lost and destroyed, the true horror of your execution finally reveals itself. Not just the death of a woman, but the murder of possibilities, the destruction of a different future, and the triumph of fear over hope in the treacherous world of Tudor England.